So, thank you very much, Professor Felser. And today is 19th of October 2022, and my name is Tsumi Hiwahata from the University of York. And it is my great pleasure to have Professor Claudia Felser. She is director of the Max Planck Institute of Chemical Physics for Solid, and we've been known each other for many years, and I've been kind of copying her work on Heusler alloys, so it is very nice to interview Claudia today. And so, Claudia, I would like to welcome you and thank you first officially, formally, for agreeing to get interviewed for this IEEE oral history project. And this is quite important project the IEEE started, so we selected quite a few people who achieved significant steps in our community, and we tried to keep those historical, sorry, I'm not telling you are old or anything, but historical background to the coming generations. So it is half educational purposes and half really scientific purposes. So we should begin with your early career or early life. So can I first ask, just officially, please state your full name and the date and place of your birth.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be selected, and I'm very happy to have you as my interviewer. So I'm Claudia Felser, and I'm born in July 28, 1962. And the city of my birth was Aachen, so it's at the borderline between Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium.
It's a very scientific city
Yes.
From the beginning. So please tell me about your childhood and where do you grow up? Well, you said Aachen, but if you move or anything, and what was your kind of typical daily life when you were a kid?
Okay, so I was one of 6 kids, and I can say my father was a programmer, so in this sense we had some relationship to natural science, if you want. And but at this time, in the 60s, 70s, it was more believed that women in Germany will stay at home and take care of the kids. So in my family, the expectation to me was not very high. So it was more or less that my mother expected me to become a nurse. So, and my brothers, they should have something like an academic career. So therefore, I think this had also some advantages, I have to say, because the expectation was not so high. So I could more or less do what I want to do. So this was my life. But I have to say, already in primary school, I had a teacher who liked to make experiments with us. So I think this really already has set the path.
Are there any other person particularly who influenced you?
I think later it was like I was not allowed to go to the German gymnasium, so because I was a girl. So but I had a teacher, math teacher in this Realschule, and he at the end forced my parents, even when I was 12 years old, that I could go to a gymnasium. I think this was really an important person. As you can imagine, with this big step, I would not have been able eventually to do what I'm doing now.
Quite interesting. And did you have any particular hobbies or extracurricular?
So I would say at this time I like music also, despite of, I was always good in math, physics, and chemistry. And I looked it up later and I found out in physics I had ever always the highest grade, even I studied later chemistry. But as I said, I was interested in music, and when I went to the other school, it was a Catholic girls' school. It's maybe also important for my career, because many scientific, successful women come from schools which are not co-educative. And there, the main subject was music in our class. So it was not science. But I changed the school later to have a school with a focus on science.
Did you have any particular activities, like did you play any instruments or?
Yeah, I played the flute and so even played in an orchestra and so on. Yeah.
It's quite serious. I didn't know that. That's very nice. And what did you want to be when you grew up, early stage?
Yeah, so at the early stage, as I said, my expectation was not so high. But then when I went to high school, I would say it was around 13, 14, 15, I started to read books like this, and I found them even in my bookshelves. So they're very clearly related to science. So I became very much interested in science. Okay, so this was then also, and then in Germany, at the end of the last 3 years, you focus on a major subject, and I focused on math and chemistry. But it was also like, it could have been physics or chemistry, but the teacher in chemistry was simply nicer. Okay.
Yeah, you said you had many nice teachers around you and kind of mentored yourself, and you clearly exceeded your parents' expectation much more. And when and why did you become interested in technology or engineering or science side more?
I would say it's an interesting question, because after school, I studied first pedagogics. Because again, going back to this expectation of female at this time, honestly. So, but at the same time, I have to say 2 of my brothers are electrical engineers. So one studied computational science. So my family was like, in some sense, having a background in science. So I would say after 2 years, I recognized that this is not what I want to do. And then I was grown up enough to say, okay, I'm much more interested in science. So I changed fields in the sense, going back to what I did in high school, and I decided to go to the university and go beyond becoming a teacher. Okay. And my expectation, again, the good thing is that there was no external expectation. So I felt like, I don't care whether I get a job. For sure, I don't want to go into go into industry. I want to do science and become a scientist, but who cares what is at the end? So this was, I think, a good starting point.
So was it quite easy to change slightly your career?
No. I think it was a total break, and I think I had to, the good thing I had to work, because now I had to find new financing, but at this time I worked in a psychiatry. And I could work in the night and on the weekends. And I was interested. I think the pedagogics of handicap was strongly related also how brain works. I'm still interested in this question, and how we learn. So it's also related to science. And I even like my job very much, I have to say, working in a hospital and seeing what can happen with the brain. If you are mentally ill, or even if you have some damage of the brain and so on.
How many years did you work in the hospital?
This was like 3 to 4 years. So.
That's quite a long time.
But I did it while I'm studying, so it was like, but I really enjoyed it.
It's quite an interesting career, definitely. And you mentioned about your math teacher and also chemistry teacher briefly. Are there any other influential people or particularly events while you are deciding your career?
So I would say I think mentoring is essential. So if I talk to young people nowadays, I say mentoring and people make a big difference. It's true. I have to say, I had different people. During my study, I would say it was also that at a certain point, I had a very good professor, so Dieter Wohlim at this time in physics. So he came from Matthias, so he was interested in superconductivity. So then you can say, you studied chemistry and physics, but chemistry as a major, but at the end you do a lot with superconductivity, magnetism, valence fluctuation, band structure calculation, and so on. So I think he was the one, when I was even still an undergrad, who really was very enthusiastic about superconductivity, even before the time of the high TC. So I went to his lectures, and then I went to other physics lectures. I would say Dieter Wohlim was also an important person in my early time in the university. But later there were other people like Burkhard Hillebrands and so on, who also were mentors. So I think this is more important, I would say, than the university, especially in Germany, where these universities are very equal.
Are there any particular moment you remember when you completely changed your life or your career got switched, kind of?
Yeah, I think the most important moment was when I stopped pedagogics to go to science, but afterwards it was like, so I was in the right flow, I would say. The people I've met and so on. I think in Cologne, studying chemistry and physics was like, I would say it was like step by step was more or less than determined. So later I had other moments which really have changed my career, so I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
The Heusler time.
Well, yes, I remember. And so going back to your university days, and why did you choose the University of Cologne?
Yeah, as I mentioned, my teacher, chemistry teacher, had already connection to Cologne, and in Germany people like to study close where they are living, and this was even close to the area I was living at this time. So it's like, and Cologne was also quite famous for natural science, physics and chemistry, and so I think it was a good decision. And I recognized also immediately that it was really fun, I have to say, compared to what I did before. I really enjoyed studying. I think I felt I'm now at the right place.
So you have, I think, very unique career. So you have the theoretical or modeling background, as well as some experimental knowledge or expertise as well. So how did you develop both aspects?
Very good question. So I think already when I was starting chemistry, so I recognized that there were nice papers of Roald Hoffmann, so whom you don't maybe know in physics, but he's a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, and he really had a very interesting view on solids. So I would say at the same time having Dieter Wohleben, who was totally excited about superconductivity, and then the moment, which was also life-changing, when there was a discovery of high-temperature superconductivity, this all came together so that I was interested in superconductivity, starting to hear lectures and seeing also that electronic structure and the understanding of symmetry can help us to really predict eventually properties of solids. And I saw on the other side in the chemistry department, the people did solid state chemistry. They didn't care so much about measuring the properties and understanding. Even they said, oh, I know this is a semiconductor. And I asked, was even, why do you think this is a semiconductor? We know, okay? And it's true. In chemistry, you can count electrons, and you already know this is probably a semiconductor. But in physics, you like to measure these things and maybe do an electronic structure calculation. So bringing this together, I already developed something which I wanted to understand. So I did then as a major theoretical chemistry, but at the same time, solid state chemistry. And I was supervised by a physicist, more or less. So it was already when I did my diploma. But my supervisor at this time, a chemist, said he cannot supervise my PhD because I did something on high TCs during my diploma. And then I had the idea that I want to look for Van Hove singularities in the electronic structure of superconductors and materials which have valence instabilities. So he was very unhappy about this idea. So, but then there was a theoretical the professor in theoretical chemistry was a physicist, and he said, I adopt you, so you can do photoemission here and can do this. So he came back. I did this as a major too, and so I did my PhD there. But at the end, I was also strongly supervised, always from physicists. So as a second supervisor, this was. So I more or less took my own path.
So you had a very nice mixture of supervisors. Yeah. Was it very special, or was it quite common?
No, I think it was special, because normally your supervisor tells you what you have to do in a PhD. And in my case, I was like inspired by Roald Hoffmann's paper and so on, and I wanted my supervisor to let me do this. So, but as I said, so the supervisor at the end for the PhD, the main and the second one, were both physicists, and they simply said, okay, it's a good idea, it's interesting, let's do it.
It was from the beginning like a self project.
Yeah, it was a self.
Yeah, that's quite nice. And so during that time, you have quite nice mixture of those supervisors. If somebody like myself asks you, what is your major? And then what do you answer?
Yeah, it was also at this time, I would say, if you see the title of my PhD thesis, it was photo emission investigation and band structure calculation of mixed valent europium compound. You would say it's a PhD thesis from a physicist viewpoint, but I was in physical chemistry, so I think it's somewhere in between.
Okay.
But there has something happened at this time, which is maybe also interesting. I became pregnant. So with my daughter, which was another very disruptive moment in my life. And so I think at this time, it was, you have to always think many years ago, was like, okay, is this now the end of my scientific life? But I luckily had a PhD supervisor who still encouraged me, and it didn't affect in the sense at this moment my career.
That's very nice. So did you work while you are pregnant?
Yes. At this time, I went to the lab until even the date of some of my colleagues became nervous, but anyway, so I was also back very fastly afterwards. Because honestly, saying this, looking backward, it was not the worst time, because I think it was a good time because I was much more flexible. So.
It's also a very big life-changing moment as well.
It's a big life-changing.
Okay, and so what was your aspirations, dream, and goals at that time? So did you, from the beginning, wanted to become a professor in the end, or you wanted to become some scientist in the lab or somewhere?
I think, as I said, since there was never an expectation to me, I had not a professor as a father or something, I think I had a relaxed time still, okay? So I think when I recognized I have the potential to become a scientist, so for sure I didn't want to work in a company, so I simply did what I thought I have to do, and I asked people, like, always I was looking for mentors and getting advice. So when I was then doing my diploma, I was invited to Stuttgart to a theoretical physicist group from Ole Andersen, who developed codes for DFT in a course. So I met the people, and at this time I was already on the way also to do theory. So computational investigation. So, and I met some other people there, somebody who just became a professor, Wolfgang Tremel, and I was a little bit naive asking him, I would like to become a professor. So, and in Germany, you need this Habilitation. And I said, I didn't even have a PhD at this time. And I asked him, can I become your Habilitant? And he said, which was also very important, he said, I think if you want to become a professor in Germany, you should go to Max Planck. Okay, so this was already the hint. And I have to say, after my postdoc, he called me, and I got a position like an assistant professor position nowadays. So he remembered 5 years later my challenging question, and he offered me a position. And this was why I went to Mainz. So it was also lucky. I was lucky, I would say, in this regard.
Yeah. So you had many nice people around you during your career, which is quite important, I think. And did you have any extracurricular activities at that time when you were doing PhD?
So since I had a baby, my extracurricular was a baby.
You're busy with,
I was busy with this, I would say. At this time, I would say this was another.
Yeah, that's. And so you said you completed your PhD in Cologne, and at that time, did you get any funding or scholarship?
So I had some limited funding at this time, which was also at a certain point running out. So I had the kid. Anyway, so I had then later, so I got this possibility at Max Planck, and then it was clear that I can continue. So at this time, funding was really not so easy. It was not obvious that you get paid for your whole PhD. So this was a little bit more depending what was the funding of the PhD advisor and so on. It was less opportunities where you could apply for funding by yourself. So, but then I applied for funding at the DFG for going to Max Planck, but I got also a grant from Max Planck. And from this time on, I would say I never had problems to get funding.
Very lucky, or I'm sure your projects are quite attractive as well. So, and during your PhD time, did you have anything particularly remember? For example, anything you think to be quite important or interesting or entertaining or?
Yeah, so as I said, I was quite busy. But I think I enjoyed my PhD time, and as I said, was entertaining maybe. So one of my most important part of my PhD was the synchrotron measurement time in Berlin, and I luckily got measurement time, even writing a handwritten proposal, because I had the feeling I need this, and I got it. So again, more or less luck or nice people. And then I went there, but at the end, I had to take care also of my daughter, because at this time my husband was busy with other things anyway. So, but she came like 1 year old to the synchrotron, you can imagine, which has led to some confusion also at a certain point. I had to stop the measurement because the baby was crying. So this is what happens if this is your situation in life.
So did she also wear the radiation badge?
No, she was outside the radiation part, luckily.
So does she remember that time?
Yeah, she knows the story, and she likes the story, honestly. Okay. Since she's an engineer nowadays, and also at the university in Germany, she likes this kind of stories.
So she's educated from the beginning, very early.
Her career path was very clear. But she's an engineer, not a scientist.
Oh, yeah. And so, so during your PhD or university time, what was the most beneficial lecture or curriculum you took?
Yeah, I would say I never followed what I had to do because I was officially a chemist. I listened also to many lectures in physics, I have to say. And I liked the lectures of Dieter Wohlim, who came with a pencil or a piece of chalk, and the cigarettes, and nothing else. He didn't care about pi or 2 pi. So, but I liked his lectures. But I liked also some other lectures, I have to say. I remember some theory lectures of Müller-Hartmann in Cologne, was also quite famous lecturer. And so I would say at this time I was more in the one to understand how superconductivity works. And the solution was easier to find in the physics department.
So do you have any advice for the PhD students now or early career researchers who may struggle to find their?
I think this is what I give all my young people, is like the easiest way to do a successful new direction in science is always at the borderline between two established direction in science. And coming with the viewpoint of a chemist to the physics department, department, or to get there some questions, so and have the other viewpoint too. I think it helps you for sure to do something new and something which somebody else didn't do before.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very nice advice, and I'm sure people will appreciate that. So once you finish your PhD, you get a job. So please tell us about your postdoc works and how Well, you've already explained how you ended up in the Max Planck Institute, but how long did you work there, and what was your kind of daily life there?
Yeah, so at Max Planck, I have to say, so I went to a theoretical physics group of Ola Andersen, whom I'm very thankful still today. So I think, so he gave me all the freedom. The only thing what he said is like, you know, Claudia, I would like to work on one element and eventually two elements, and the high thesis is already a lot for a theoretician, okay? And you come every day with a new compound. So I simply think this is, was what I liked very much. So I learned a lot, but again, I think I was not really, so I did my own stuff, I would say.
So did you meet your boss every day, or you had some group meeting type thing?
No, I had a sub-boss, I would say, Ove Jepsen, who was super nice and has helped me in everyday questions. So I really have to thank him because he brought me through my postdoc time, but he really influenced me very strongly about what I know nowadays on density functional theory and all the things to do. Even, yeah, so new things people use nowadays were set, the basic was set at this time. So I really, and he spent a lot of time with me, teaching me even the details. And were very patient for somebody who had partially, so I had some physics education also in theory, but probably less compared to somebody who only studied physics. And so I think he was very patient with me, I have to say.
Oh, yes. And then you moved to the Centre National de la Research Scientifique, CNRS, in France. So how did you decide to move to CNRS?
So I have to say, so I was also co-supervised at the Max Planck by a chemist, Hans Simon. And so he was had a strong relationship to Jean Rouxel, who was the head of the CNRS. And so at this time, so Hans Simon asked me when he was visiting to give a talk, which was a little bit challenging for me because it was like a talk in public and in a bigger group in English. Anyway, I managed, and Rouxel, he asked me whether I want to come to Nantes. So, and Hans Simon allowed me that I spent a year in Nantes, so to teach his people density functional theory. So he was more focused on charge density wave system. But I thought also it's nice because I learn new aspects of solid-state chemistry, but also properties.
So how about the materials? Are there any changes?
Yeah, there was a material. Anyway, so some of the ideas I brought from the Max Planck. So it was more the direction of 2D materials. At this time, I came into magnetism beyond superconductivity. So because I was interested in lanthanum diiodide, but then also in gadolinium diiodide, which is a 2D material, which has a TC around room temperature. So this was one, and we wanted to change the electronic structure by doping, and it's very difficult to dope. And the idea was here to do intercalation, and this group in France was expert in intercalation. So this was the main motivation why at this time I moved there. And Ola Andersen had the idea that lanthanum diiodide, the non-magnetic, would have been a nice superconductor because it has a similar band structure with Van Hofe singularities at the high TCs. And the other one has interesting magnetic properties.
Okay, so you started
This was my move to magnetism.
So how did you find magnetism at that time?
No, it was exactly at this time. And this brought me at the end also to the IEEE. So when I then finally went to Mainz, so as I told you, so Tremer gave me the telephone call. I went to Mainz as a habilitant. So at this time, so I had the idea that compounds which are superconducting have a magnetic counterpart with the Van Hofe singularity, and this compound then shows a colossal magnetoresistance effect. So at this time, people were very much interested in colossal magnetoresistance, having copper oxide compounds, caprates on high TC side and the manganites on the colossal magnetoresistance side. And the idea of lanthanum diiodide and gadolinium diiodide, so I did this prediction, and I looked for many other compounds, by the way, and gadolinium diiodide really showed the colossal magnetoresistance effect even at room temperature. So this worked with the Van Hove singularity idea. So and this brought me even, then I can tell you, to think about maybe one can do something useful. Okay, and there was a school, I think, in Jülich at this time, because Grünbeck was in Jülich, and the people were interested in giant magnetoresistance effect. So I went there, and the people who taught there were people from Siemens, from IBM, and so on. And this was the next step from Mainz. IBM is at Mainz, so I again wrote a handwritten letter or something, maybe at this time on the computer, I don't want to lie, and say, so I have an interesting compound, maybe we can talk about this. The manganites are not good for room temperature, but my compound is good for room temperature. And Siemens ignored it, okay, but IBM invited me. So I was, since they had the read-head production in Mainz, so they invited me, a chemist with very strange ideas. And this was, I would say, the starting point why I'm in the IEEE.
Then you started long-standing collaboration with IBM as well.
So the story is even more interesting. So I met this guy, Johannes Winden, who was lecturer in Jülich for this giant magnetoresistance. And I have to say, already during my PhD, Grünberg was working in the same group, which was, I was also partially working. I did my photo emission group work with Wolfgang Eberhard, so Grünberg. So I have seen Grünberg before, and so I saw the connection and so on. Anyway, I've met this person from IBM, Johannes Winden, and he said, okay, gadolinium diiodide is not the right material for our sputtering system. And he said also he doesn't like manganites. And he doesn't like manganese in general in the chamber, he said. So I should think about something similar with cobalt, chromium, and iron. This is what they like. Okay, so I went back home, and I started. Then this is a little bit again huge, because this was already just after the GMR effect. It was still this was still new. So and then I recognized from my other work on the superconductors, there is this class of Heusler compounds which have Van Hove singularities, and they are superconducting. But they're 3D superconductors, so they are boring for the people in the superconducting communities. They didn't like them. So I thought maybe I find interesting colossal magnetoresistance effects or something in Heusler compounds. Since they're also half metallic, so this was more or less my path, and really from superconductivity more into magnetism.
And was that the time you started to work with Professor Küppler?
Yes. Yes, because then I was in Mainz, okay? And I was, at the beginning in Mainz, still interested in superconductivity. My habilitation is about comparing superconductors and giant magnetoresistance and colossal magnetoresistance in their electronic structure, and the gadolinium diiodide project. But then also the Heuslers, no? And so since there was a collaboration between Darmstadt and Mainz and Frankfurt, so there was already people thinking about a new collaborative research center, and there was a meeting, and I remember I was sitting there in Küppler. And then I thought, oh, this is my God in Heuslers. He invented the cobalt Heuslers and the half metallicity, or the half metallicity in cobalt Heuslers, I have to say, theoretically, while de Groot did this for the half Heuslers. I thought, wow. And this is like, you're right, this is now, I'm still working with him. Okay, he's 86, by the way, since a few days. And I'm very happy to have such a experienced collaborator on magnetic compounds.
Yes, and I think his contribution is enormous
to
this community as well. So, and once you started your group in Mainz, how did you develop or establish your group?
Yeah, I have to thank IBM for this, and also then Burkhard and the IEEE. So this was a part of my success. So since this didn't work with gadolinium diiodide, I came up with cobalt, chromium, iron, aluminium stuff. And we saw some magnetoresistance effect in these materials. And so I went back to IBM and said, look, no manganese, no gadolinium, no strange things. And so then IBM helped me to get a invited talk at the IEEE meeting in Amsterdam. I think it was the Intermag in Amsterdam. And they wanted to introduce me to Stuart Parking. This is another part of my life-changing moments, okay? So, so I got this invited talk, and I met people like Günter Reis. They also started on the manganese-containing Heusler compounds, and this was why we are really strongly started. But we were very much interested thinking about that Van Hove singularity leads to higher MR and stuff like this at this. Anyway, so this was my collaboration with IBM in Germany, because Mainz has produced the retard by this time, and I got into contact again with Grünberg, and so I was very much then. And then I met Burkhard Hillebrands, who was an excellent mentor then, for especially this time and my early professorship time, I would say, in Mainz, which helped me to establish research centers, excellence initiatives. So if you want to go ahead, you have to do more than simply doing your research. So this was the starting point, I would say, was Intermag in Amsterdam.
Yeah, that's quite some years.
So now we are in 2000.
Well, yes. So as far as I know, in the German system, it's quite difficult to continue your career in the same university to start from assistant professor, associate, and then full professor. So how did you manage in this regard?
So I have to say this was not so difficult, because I got offers from other universities. So I got a full professor offer in Ulm. And I have to say, when my daughter was 12, so I exactly, no, 10. At this time she was 10. So we moved even from Mainz to Ulm. And at the same time, I got also an offer for professorship from Osnabrück, but I decided to go to Ulm. And then I got a counter offer a few months later from Mainz. So, yeah, and since I have established already quite good connections with Kaiserslautern, this started already. So it was quite attractive for me to go back to Mainz and to continue. And at this time, my daughter said, this is the last time, Mommy, I move. After she changed homes 13 times, she said in her life, she is counting, not me. So it was clear I have to stay there until she graduated from high school and live her own life. Okay,
so that's the critical parameter for your career. Okay, and do you have any particular project you proud of during your Mainz period?
For sure, this was a Heusler compound and a compounds-related project, and the work I did with Burkhard together, this research center. So, and then later even that we were able to get a School of Excellence in the German Excellence Competition, the first excellence project which was successful in the whole state of Rheinland-Pfalz. And I would say at the same time, I also did what I did at this time. I did a lot for young school students. So I got even the Order of Merit for this. So I founded a school lab, and this I'm also very proud of, okay? Because this was also fitting to my life at this time. So we did something like Harry Potter events. This I did with Wolfgang Tremel, okay? So which were very popular, even made it into the news and so on. Because the university, the chemistry department was looking more like in the Harry Potter movies, and the kids came with cakes which looked quite ugly and so on. So this, I think, was also a nice time, because it fitted perfectly to my private life. I had a daughter around this time, and I did a lot of activities in this direction, despite of doing this spintronic, magnetic, IEEE. This was more or less starting, and this was running. So the magnetic part and the excellence became bigger and bigger and bigger. And this other activities, at this time, we got permanent funding for this, and so I was not so necessary, so my help was not so necessary. So I changed the activities again back to more science.
I think you kindly initiated these type of outreach activities, and Mainz, Kaiserslautern, that region is still one of the most active regions in Germany, as far as I know. So it's quite important for the younger generations to get attracted. And so how was your teaching side while you are in Mainz? Did you enjoy teaching, or did you have any particular modules you taught?
So I did the normal teaching you do in Germany. You know, I would say I enjoyed teaching because I liked the interaction with the students, but I also liked the interaction with the school students. And I have to say also, I even had to give lectures to the medical school students, which most of the people don't like, but I liked it, honestly. And so therefore, I think I like teaching, but I would say this is, if I would say, is teaching, are you very ambitious about teaching? I would say I had at this time the outreach activities and the excellence activities, so you cannot do everything perfectly. So I would say I think it's important. I think good teaching activities is important, and I think I like what people are doing nowadays to try to do it more modular and more in smaller groups than teaching in the front of the people. So I think this is a very important direction. But I would say my contribution to this is very limited, since you cannot do everything.
I'm sure you have been.
Even I have a background in pedagogy.
Oh, that explains. And in addition to all these excellent activities, you had quite strong international collaborations, especially in research. For example, you had the EU JST project and also the German funding agency, DFG, with JST and so on. So how did you develop or establish those very broad international collaborations?
I have to say the collaboration with Japan, the credit goes to Burkhard Hellebrands, okay? He did a lot, but I have to say also at a very early time, I have met Miyazaki, Professor Miyazaki, who I think is an important person in spintronics and also related to the discovery of TMR. And I think I liked him very much, and I think he was also some person who played a role in my life, I would say, an inspirative role. But I think if you are two people from two universities or scientists from two universities like Burkhard and me were, I think we were simply a dream team in the state to get things done in the state. We discussed a lot how can we improve our universities, what can we do for magnetism, for the excellence initiatives, but in the same way, how can we increase our very, very good collaboration in Japan? Because honestly, Heuslers, in this sense, it was more related to me. Heuslers were really growing in Germany and Japan. And I think now people enjoying work on Heuslers also in the US, but they followed our work. I think this was really the strong activities on Heuslers were Japan and Germany in spintronics. And I think Stuart is still working also, so Heuslers might still play a role for MRAM. So I know that there are some activities, but I don't know anything important with Samsung.
It's a secret problem.
Yeah, it's a secret thing. Okay, but I think there's. So I have to say, when I met Stuart in Amsterdam, he was not very interested in Heuslers, and he was quite rude to me. He said, no, Heuslers, I don't believe in Heuslers. But I think later he started to become interested in Heuslers, and you see, nowadays we are married.
He told me the same thing when we met at the conference in Nagoya. He said, oh, forget about Heusler and switch to superconductors.
And I have to say, in Nagoya, I was also at this conference. And Miyazaki, he invited me to a nice dinner. I remember that I was thinking, shall I bring Stuart or Burkhard? But Miyazaki said, I think it's a good idea to bring Stuart to Burkhard. And I thought, yes, it's a good idea because this guy doesn't like Heusler. He changed his mind.
Yes, yes.
Good news for Heuslers, okay?
I think they had a nice dinner when Stuart got the fellow.
Yeah, so I think Miyazaki is really an expert of good food. Professor Miyazaki. I enjoyed very, I would say one of the best invitations for good dinners I had from him.
So I will tell him when I go back. So yeah, that's nice. So you achieved many things in Mainz, and why did you decide to move to the Max Planck Institute?
Okay, one should say in Germany, Max Planck is heaven. And I think even universities, very often they give up to then fight for you. Anyway, so it was like, it's always, first of all, I have to say, my daughter was independent, so I could move. And yeah, so I was thinking, do I move to the US or I wanted to do something else. At this time, already thinking, I think I had an offer from, at this time from Rutgers. But so then I got the offer from Max Planck, and I thought this is maybe the right move now. It was also a little bit now you can then widen your horizon, and this is, at this time I was already strongly interacting with Stuart and Stanford. I became involved so via Shushen Zhang, who was also at IBM, I have to say, moved from IBM to Stanford, was a very close friend of Stuart, so Stuart introduced me to Shushen, so I became interested in topology. And I would say also topology and magnetism, which we are just started to studying, and we wrote a perspective, I think will have a big future.
Yes, definitely. So that's the change in your kind of research directions. Are there any other big changes as compared with your university life to the as a director? So you may have completely different life, but
I would say I had already a lot of funding when I was in Mainz, thanks to my joint effort with Burkhard and Tillebrands, I have to say. So we were very active, we did a good job, and also thanks to our collaboration with Japan, I would say this was also inspiring. You know, I would say I'm a little bit sad that some of the things got a little bit lost in this, not with Burkhard, but also anyway, so, but this belongs to life maybe, that you cannot do everything. And so I was very much attracted by Shushen's ideas in topology. So, but I still think the nice thing is now, I think we are merging now. And I think you are also doing topology and Heusler's. I think Heusler's is the ideal material in this context. Again, we are coming back much more to Heusler's and topology nowadays. So I would say, what can I do? I can have more different subjects at Max Planck because I don't always have to apply for funding. So I get more, I can easily try something new. This is different from a university where you first have to apply and hopefully get the funding. And then.
And is it very difficult to manage many people in the institute, because you are the director, so you have to...
Yeah, I'm the director of the subgroup, and we are 4 directors, and we are, the managing director changes from time to time. So managing director is still a bigger challenge just because you are in charge with running the institute, etc., and so on. Just now I'm not managing director. I would say the general goal of my group is quite similar. But you know, you get now more independent people, so like these group leaders, and you get more inspiration. I would say it's not difficult to manage because they are on a higher level of independencies. They are old enough to do what they have to do. And I can collaborate with them on certain subjects, but they do also partially their own stuff. So this is like, I think, even more fun. I think it keeps you alive, because if you're a professor, you have only your people. And in this sense, I have very good interaction with people on the same level of education or something. Or sometimes they are younger than you. This is also keeping you even more alive. I think I enjoy it, I have to say.
Yes, of course. That's quite nice atmosphere, I think. And you, based on your experience or career, to spend some time in the university, some time in the research institute and so on, what do you think to be the success in your job, which is maybe useful for the especially early career researchers?
I would say I was at Max Planck, went to the university, went back to Max Planck is a good path. I'm happy that I had the university experience. This gives me sometimes also a modest feeling, because we really have a good funding situation, and I think we should also, I understand the perspective in Germany, the difference between a research institution and the university. So I think it's important to understand both perspectives, okay? I still think that it's a very important experience to teach young people, and I think there are advantages and disadvantages at the different places, you know. I think working with PhD students as a part of their university education is something different from working in a research institute. I like both perspectives, I have to say.
Yes, but in both places it is always nice to see all the younger people, and they are quite creative, and you may, as you said, you may get inspired from their idea.
Yeah, I think what you see in a research institution like here, you have more output of people who become professors, okay? Because it's like the people come here as a postdoc and they go back to their countries and become professors. So it's a little bit different, and you have to have more broader ideas, I would say, to develop with them, because they all have to have their individual research career, which should be distinguished from what you are doing, because they want to go to their country and be distinguished. So I think this is very important and a little bit more challenging compared to university.
Yes, of course. So do you have anything else you can tell us about your recent research on Heusler alloys?
Yeah, so we are very much interested in combining topology and Heusler compounds and looking for the topological properties of magnetic Heusler compounds. And I think there is still combining magnetism and topology, we still see only the tip of the iceberg. I think one thing is you can go beyond Heusler compounds. So our research unit was, for example, on double perovskites and Heusler compound to compare them. So I still think that, as I said, from the magnetic compounds, we didn't really see all the possibilities from the material side, but even from the property side. So like even to connect real space topology, like while point. So every crossing point in a ferromagnet is a while point. And or with real space topology and the electronic structure, like skyrmions with, for example, while points, is something which is a big open question for theory even. But on the other side, you can find new materials, but I think you can even find new interesting topological properties in magnetic compounds where we don't think about yet, and maybe some smart theoreticians should think about. And then we have the whole thing of domain walls and something. And we have the non-collinear magnetic, antiferromagnetic compounds, which was totally overseen as showing anomalous Hall effect and anomalous Nernst effect. And now they show even higher values in the ferromagnet. So all this, I think, is so exciting. And I think there will be a lot of impact in the future. I believe, for example, in magnetothermoelectric, will reach higher SETIs, I'm sure, a figure of merit than a conventional one. So it has to be simply be done.
Yes, yes. So you would expect those to be really commercialized
Yeah,
in
I
some
expect
point.
this.
Yeah, that's very good to know. So let's move on to some aspects you had with the IEEE. So did you find the IEEE to be useful? And especially you mentioned about the Intermag in Amsterdam. So do you have any suggestions or any advice to the, especially the IEEE Magnetic Society, what we should improve?
So I think the IEEE has to encourage young people and diverse people. So I think we really have to work in really also in the responsible position to have more young people and to have, for example, more women. So, but this is a change since in engineering there are less women. So one thing is we might have to become even in our outreach more attractive. And also in maybe how we define how to study electrical engineering. What I really learned from my own experience with my daughter, for example, okay? She studied physics and she thought it's boring, nobody cares about, and we have climate change problem, who cares about physics, okay? Find a low temperature superconductor with rhenium, nobody will ever, ever use it, okay? Maybe at room temperature it would even not be useful because it's rhenium. So then she found out that she can become an engineer of environmental technology, which was originally chemical engineering or a process, whatever, but they simply painted it green. I always think we have to do something to make it more attractive to the young generation. They really see much more than us what are the really needs for the future. We have to be more efficient in energy conversion. We have to come up with new concepts. And this is also a lot of engineering, or more energy conversion, efficient computational concepts, which people do. But all this has to be also done in a way to attract more people from other fields who simply don't want to be a nerd or a boring engineer. No, it's not boring engineer, but it's simply like we should maybe combine this really fundamental important knowledge, which physics has and engineering, but at the end we should modernize it. I would say honestly, I studied chemistry and my daughter, and what she did in physics and chemistry was exactly the same. So you can go even a generation later, it's just the same. Okay, but the world has totally changed, and the questions and the changes have changed, you know. So I think we have to work on this. We have to look more, how do we present our society in a modern way to face changes like climate change. And I know, I agree that, for example, new hard magnets without rare earths is one thing, but even to tell that, to have a better outreach, how important it is, for example, to have windmills or all the cars, and then you start how much lithium you need and blah, blah, blah. All this question, I think we have to address.
Yeah, that's really a very important point. And well, I think as a society, we need to think about it, and especially to attract more people from the younger generation. So I think we are close to the end of your interview, and thank you very much for spending your time. And do you have any final concluding remark, especially to the younger generation, based on your research career? Do you have any advice to them or any suggestions to them?
So as I already mentioned several times, it's extremely important to have good mentors. This is advice to the younger and the older generation. So we need more people for the future. I think we need many, many more scientists, but also engineers for the future, for the challenges we face in the future, if we really see what are the predictions for climate change, etc. But I think I'm also quite optimistic. I like the new generation. I think I'm not the person who always complains. So they are smart. They have different views on how the world should be. They want to have work-life balance. I'm really supporting this too. I had a kid. My daughter is a PhD student, has a kid. I think we should And it doesn't make a difference. Honestly, I think it's not necessary that you work day and night to be a successful scientist. You still can have other important things in your life. And thank you for always asking the question, what else did you do? I think this is important. We should be more open and happy about the young generation. And I also recognize, so in Germany, there was once a report, I don't bet on the number, but this was like that 45% of the students are in STEM or engineering, so which seems to be quite a good number, I think, and we should keep this number and motivate more people to go in this direction. But I'm sure we can do this with all these changes. So all these people who are fearing that we will really have big problems with the climate change, they are our customers. Okay, we should motivate them to do something and to do something practically. And the answer should be becoming a scientist or an engineer.
Yeah, that's quite encouraging. So thank you very much indeed for your inspiring talk and also advices, especially to the younger generation and also researchers in our society. So thank you very much, and I hope people will find your comments or opinions to be quite useful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice talk. So, discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.